Welcome to Lesson 7 in the WPF with MVVM add-on course. In this lesson, we're going to connect the Create Person form to the Create Team form. And this is where things start to get fun. In Wind forms, we build interfaces and pass the parent instance to the form so we know where to send the data back, and that works. But in Caliburn Micro, there's an easier and more powerful way to get things connected. It's called the Event Aggregator. We're going to start there, and then we'll make use of it in our forms. I get excited about tools like this because they add so much power to my developer's toolbox. Let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is I actually want to right-click on my WPF project and add a new class. And we'll call this the Event Aggregator, or aggregation, let's do that, aggregation provider. And we'll make this a public static class. Now this is one place where I deviate a little bit from the files you'll see online, the examples you'll see online. And the reason why is because the way this works best, most efficient, is if you create a singleton, which a singleton is a class instance that can only ever get instantiated once and then gets shared around. We're not going to do that. We're actually going to create a public static class, which is similar but a little different. Now, a singleton is most easily used if you have a dependency injection system, which Caliburn Micro works great with a dependency injection system. The only problem is it adds one more layer of complexity to your application. If you're just learning WPF with Caliburn Micro, I really wouldn't recommend doing dependency injection at the same time. It just adds one more kind of complex debugging system, or system to debug. So it's kind of hard to debug dependency injection well, and then you add on it the idea that Caliburn Micro ties all these things together using the names, and if that breaks, what happens? And so it just adds all this complexity all at once. And that's why sometimes it's really hard to use Caliburn Micro, besides the documentation not being great. It's because they also mix into dependency injection at the same time and just kind of muddy the waters. So we're going to stay away from dependency injection in this course. And instead, in this place, we're going to use a public static class for event aggregation provider. Now in here, we're only going to have one property, and it's an auto property. And it'll actually be static. I'll change it to static in a minute. The type is event aggregator. Add the using statement for Caliburn Micro. And I'm going to change my property name to event aggregator. Now I am calling mine event aggregator as well, and that would work. It's just we have to specify is the Caliburn Micro event aggregator, or is it our tracker WPF UI event aggregator. So let's change that to be tracker event aggregator. That way it's just very, very clear what we're talking about. In this case, the tracker event aggregator. Now I have to make it static. And I'm also going to set it initially to a new event aggregator. So now we have this tracker event aggregator, which is a static class, a static property. Therefore, everywhere in my WPF application can access this event aggregator. Now, you may be saying, why are we doing this? What is this? What's going on? And I try not to do too much code where I'm just saying, just type it. And really, so far I've just said to just type this. But here's what this does. Caliburn Micro has this tool called an event aggregator. We're tapping into that at this point. We're creating a new one that we can use throughout our application. And what this is, think of it as a pool. And every time, anywhere in the application, we want to create an event or a throw an event, let's call it that. We want to start a new event and say this happened. We just throw it in the pool. We say tracker event aggregator, this happened. And then anywhere else in the application, we can subscribe to any of those events. It's called handling. So I may handle the event you just threw in the pool, even though I'm at a totally different end of the application. I can hear that. I'll hear the splash, I'll pull it out, and I'll use it. So it's a real easy way to listen to events on different forms. And we don't need to know which forms we're going to throw those events. We just know we handle those events. And the forms just know I'm throwing this event. The two don't really talk to each other at all. So let's see how this is going to work kind of in the real world. So we can close this out and we can go to our create person view model. And down here we have this to do. Send results back to the parent and close. So down here what we're going to do is say event aggregation provider dot tracker event aggregator dot publish on UI thread P. Now what did I just do? I said there's a new event coming. This publish on UI thread says on the user interface thread so that our front end can hear it, I am going to say that there's a new event happening. And what's that event? I just pass in P, which is our person model. That's all there is to it. I have said a new person model event has happened. I didn't say on click event. I didn't say to create some kind of event. I just said new P, which is a person model. That's it. Now we're going to leave this alone right now, and we're going to go over to the create team view model. And down here, well, actually up here at the top, let's start here. We're going to say that we're going to handle person events. So we implement a I handle, and this is an interface. So I handle person model. Now what this says is this class can handle person model events. Now, if I do this little light bulb or control dot and say implement interface, takes and it says, okay, put that in the selected team members, remove it from the list, and then notify of can create team. I'm going to copy this and bring it down here. We're going to change it a bit because it's not in the available team members list. And it's not selected team member to add, it's message. So we'll add the person coming back. We'll add them to our selected team members list, and we'll notify of property change to the can create team event or the button. Now we have one more line of code to add. We have to come up to the constructor, which let's collapse all this stuff down just because it's a little bit overwhelming to have so much open. I could do collapse the definitions for everything. I'm not going to. I'm just going to do it manually. I find that collapse the definition sometimes does more than I want. In this case, the create team member, I want to leave open. And I also want to leave open the create team since I have a to-do there as well. but everything else I can minimize down. In our public create team view model, which is our constructor, I'm going to say event aggregation provider, tracker event aggregator, subscribe. I'm going to pass in this. What is this? It's the current instance of this create team view model. So what I'm saying here is I am now a subscriber to events. And so this puts me in the pool as a listener. And what it says is when I get put in the pool as a listener, this instance, it looks up and sees what I've handled. In this case, I handle the person model events. Therefore, when a person model event happens, it looks through and says, do you handle person model events? If you do, go ahead and fire off the handle method. So it's passing it through. So it really is doing something similar to what we did with our WinForm application. We're passing through an instance and saying we have one method you can call where you pass back an object. Well, same thing's happening. It's just that it's a little more powerful, a lot more powerful actually, and it's much more generic as well. So in that little bit of time, we've created the event aggregator pool. So we created that pool, and we have put an event into the pool, and we have listened for that same event. Now, in order to see this in action, we actually have to wire these two forms together. So let's start by looking at the two forms. Let's start with the create team view. Now what we want is when we click the create member button, it's going to replace the select team members and this list box with our create person form. So how are we going to do that? Well, what we're going to do, let's rearrange things a little bit, is we're actually going to put our text box and list box into a stack panel, a vertical stack panel. So let's cut these out and say stack panel orientation equals vertical and paste them back in. They fit pretty much the same way, but I do want to make some modifications. I want to change the margins on the stack panel itself. So margin equals 5 on the left, 10 at the top, 5 on the right, and then let's put 0 at the bottom. Now what we can do is take away our margins here, all these, and just end up with margins at the bottom. So 0, 0, 0, and then here we can take away our margins entirely because they fit into this overall stack panel. So really all I did, and you might have to think about it for a minute, is essentially I changed the stack panel to take over most of the margins, like the border margins and the top margin. And I said, okay, the only margins you need to worry about are your separation between each other. So that's what I did there. Now, the reason I created a stack panel here is because I'm going to want to hide this entire stack panel. And believe it or not, that's actually really easy to do with stack panels and grids. And the way I do it is to give it a name. I'm going to call this the selected team members is visible. Now you don't have to say is visible, but that is kind of a standard way of saying it. And that just indicates that this is going to be a Boolean. Now, it doesn't work everywhere. It works on stack panels and grids for sure. Does not on text blocks. But with this, I can set a Boolean property. And since it's a Boolean, it's going to say, okay, that means the visible for stack panel gets set to true or false. Yes or no, on or off, visible or invisible. So selected team members is visible. Now I'll create a new stack panel. And I will call this x:\name equals add person is visible. And I'm going to give this an orientation of vertical as well. Not that it matters, since I'll just be putting the whole form in there. And then I will actually copy this margin as well, because that margin I want it to be identical. So there's a new stack panel for my user control. I'm going to add a content control. And the only thing I need to do here is I need to give an x:\name equals active item. Remember, we only have one, then you just say active item, and that's the built-in name for the content control or the subform. So content control. So technically I have both visible right now, but I'm going to change that by adding the select team members is visible and the add person is visible Boolean properties to my backend. That way I can say only one is visible at a time. So let's do that. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to go to my create team view model. I'm going to add a new property, prop full. It's going to bool. Now let's paste in, not there, there. And then I'll change the beginning to be an underscore lowercase s. And change the name there. So this is my property for do I show the selected team members area, true or false. And I'll add my notify a property change. And then I'll move this up. And now I'll do it one more time for the next Boolean. And I don't want to do a prop, I want to do a prop full. And this one is called, let's get it here. If I can find it. That's what I dislike about XAML is it's really hard not to have just a blob. All right, so there's my name that I want. So I'll call it that, and I will change the prefix. And I'll add my notify. All right, so now I have my two properties. I'll move this up to the top. I'll get rid of the extra line. Now I have my two properties that indicate should I have the selected team members visible or should I have the add person is visible. Now I'm going to default these values so that the selected team members is always visible and the add person is always invisible until we change it. Now we're working with Booleans, and these two are opposite. You could have said that the one Boolean was just the opposite of the other. So it returns not selected team member is visible or something like that to always keep them opposite. But I'm not going to do that. I'm going to have two separate Booleans. On the off chance I would somehow, sometime decide I want to have both visible at the same time. It's possible. So, but for right now, I'm going to say that one's visible and one's not, and just switch. Now I start with this area being visible and the one that's nothing right now, invisible. But when I hit the create member button, which that's down here, I want to switch. So the first thing I'm going to do, let's find this property, select a team member visible is visible. I'm going to say that is false And then I'm going to say that the add person is visible is true. But before I do that, I want to make sure I load up my form. So let's activate item. And we're going to say new create person view model. So that's going to activate my create person. And it's not active item, it's activate. There we go. Activate item. So that's going to launch the new create person view model, and it's going to show us that area. Now, when we complete, so when we down here handle this message, we can do just the opposite. We can take these two and flip them around. So let's copy these, and we're going to actually, let's grab this and paste it right between. And we'll say that selected team member is visible is true, and the add person is visible is false. So that flip-flops the two. The only thing it doesn't do is close the person form. So in our create person, after we bubble up the event, we're going to say this try close. And what this .try close does is it attempts to close the form. And as long as there's no method that says, no, you can't close yet because you haven't saved or something like that, as long as nothing like that, we'll actually close our form. That try close allows us to keep the form open if we have some kind of dirty check to make sure that the form isn't dirty or we haven't created a form and then not saved it. We haven't implemented anything like that yet, so try close should work no problem. So we have our handle. It's going to swap which things are visible, and it's going to add that item to our list and notify the can create team property that it may want to recheck to see if it's valid to create a team. So in theory, all of this is done. In theory, this should all work. Now, we all know how theories work in programming, so let's go ahead and try it. I'll modify the shell. Instead of create person view model, I'm going to say create team view model. Let's run this, and hopefully we'll see the team show up in our form first, and it does. Now we can say that team name is test team. Let's not add a person yet. Let's create a member. Check that out. We now have something in this box instead of our list of people. So I can say Tommy, George, Tommy at test.com, and the cell phone is, let's go with 212-555-1212. It will hit create person. Now, our form is shown again. Our list box has one item, Tommy George, and we can create a team. I'm not sure if you caught just how cool this is, but this is some pretty cool stuff. The ability to insert a form, move things around, change things, have it all adjust on the fly based upon the criteria we give it is pretty powerful stuff. We can really use this for some really cool applications. Now, that's all we need to do in the person wire up to team lesson. We have allowed ourselves to create a new person. When we fill this person out and say create person, it adds them to our list and it takes away this form. Now, the one thing we haven't done is we haven't created a cancel button. In WinForms, that wasn't a big deal because we just had this new pop-up box. We just hit the X in the corner of, it goes away, and that's essentially a cancel. But here, I can't really go anywhere until I actually do something with this create person. So let's create a cancel creation or cancel button on this create person. So let's go over to our create person view model, and we'll create a new method, public void cancel creation. I don't like to use cancel because cancel might be a keyword in some places. It's just better to use a two-word description. So cancel creation. And the only thing it's going to do is it's going to fire a new event and try close. And in fact, this to-do can go away because we're done with that. Now, why would I push out a new event? And here we'll just do a new person model. Now, why would I pass through a new person model? Well, I want to still trigger the event that my other form is listening for, saying we're ready to close, and I want to close because that way I not only close the form, but also tell the page, switch back to your list view. So it's going to create a new person model, which would cause a problem if I just listened for it. Because right now, I just throw that thing onto my selected team members. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to switch this to say, let's actually wrap this. I'm going to cut it. I'm going to say if message.firstname.length is greater than 0, add it to our list. The reason why? I know that first name should have a length greater than 0 because otherwise it wouldn't be a valid form. So now I only add it if it's a valid message, but either way I switch back. Now I also call this notify of property change, which I can move that up to here to be more efficient because we don't actually change anything if we cancel. So the only thing we'll have to do is call this cancel creation from our create person. So create person view. Down here, I'm actually going to create a stack panel instead. So let's do this. Stack panel. Orientation is horizontal. And then I'll actually move this button. So I'll cut it. I'll paste it. And I'm going to move the row and column indicators. So let's cut that. I'm going to paste them onto the stack panel. That way, the stack panel is what gets put in the right spot. I'm also going to move that margin. So let's move this margin right here. I'm going to cut it, and I will paste it. So now the stack panel has that margin of 5 on the left and right. Now my button is pretty plain. There's not a lot to it. It's just the name and padding of 10. Now I do want to say the stack panel is going to have horizontal alignment of center. Let's move it to the center. And now I can create my next button. And this is going to be called what? It's cancel creation. So cancel creation. And we'll say cancel on the button itself. We don't have to say cancel person or cancel creation. It's just cancel. If you wanted to have a little more symmetry, you could say cancel person. That would probably create, in fact, let's do that. That creates a little more symmetry in the buttons. But the thing I don't like is now the two buttons look almost identical. and you can't tell which is which on first glance. So either I would change the color of these buttons, which is very easy to do, or I would change the wording. So let's do this. Let's say color background equals red. There we go. So now it makes it really bold, really in your face that, hey, this is the cancel button. Is it ugly? Yeah, it kind of is. I'm not a big fan. I'd probably look at changing that. The first thing I look at doing is taking off just red. So 0, 0, 5, 0. And now we have our two buttons, and it should be wired up to the cancel creation. Let's try it out. Okay. So in our create team, we could say create member. I could start typing something in and go, no, that's not what I want. Cancel person. And it says object reference not set to an instance of an object because the message.firstname is null. Well, that's a problem because we haven't set any of our values to be anything other than a null value, except for full name. So there's two things we could do here. Actually, there's three. One, we can modify our class library to initialize those four values. I'm not a fan of that because that changes something in our class library, which something else might be depending on those to be null. Not a big fan of that. Number two, instead of just saying equals new person model, we could actually assign values to the first name, last name, email, and cell phone, maybe even values of empty string. That's a possibility. Or the third possibility is we check this full name to see its value. Now, I don't know if you can see that or not, and I'll zoom in, but that right there actually has a space in the full name. That's because we say first name space last name. So that's something to think about, and I think I want to go that route. So I'm going to say instead of length is greater than 0, I'm actually going to cut this entire thing out and say string is null or white space, because just spaces are considered white space. Message.fullName. And now it returns a true or false. Even better, this would work on first name because first name is null. And that's okay. It's going to say, sure, it's null, therefore it's true, therefore, which we want it to be not true. So if it's null or white space, so not null or white space. So if this is false, we go into here. It's going to be false only if full name has a real value in it, or any of the fields we give it. So we could give it any of those fields right now. So that should work. Let's give it a shot again. And we'll expand this out and say create member. I'm going to start typing in one of the fields and then say, nope, cancel. And I'm back. Now, just to verify this works, let's add a few people and then hit create member. I'll start typing somewhere, cancel. Those people are still there. So we're not losing anything by going back. Now, if I create member again, it's cleared out because we've closed the form and reopened it. If I hadn't done the this.try close, it would still be there, just hidden. which that would be a problem if I create a person out of it and then completed, because when I come back to it again, all these fields will be filled out still. So we either need to clean out those fields, or we can just open and close it as necessary. I kind of prefer the second option because I know for a fact that everything starts over from scratch. I'm not remembering anything from form to form. Now, the one last thing I want to just at least mention is the idea that we don't have to replace just that list box, just this list box here in the label. We could replace even more. In fact, we could replace this entire section here with this form instead. And that's a possibility. I decide I like just this section being replaced, but I can really see the appeal of replacing more, since right now I could still add Tim Corey as a member of the list. I can't even see it, but it did work. So that's a little quirky. So it's really up to you if you decide you want to go this route or not. In this case, I'm going to leave it alone. If you want to change it, just add more things to this items list box, or I'm sorry, the stack panel. So add these to the stack panel, maybe the create team as well, maybe the whole thing to the stack panel, and then just hide the entire stack panel and show the other one. Once we actually build our entire create tournament form, we might find we want more space or more adjustability, and so we might do that. We'll see. But in the meantime, I think this works. And with that being said, that completes connecting the forms. Really wasn't a big deal. The connection of the forms started with us creating that event aggregator pool, and then creating those events, and then it ended with us just handling, showing and hiding those sections depending on where we are in our process. So it really wasn't hard. We'll use this technique again, because notice right here, pass the team information back to the parent and close the form. Same thing. Call a new event. It'll be a team event instead of a person event, and we'll close the form. So we're going to do this again, and now that you've done it once, it'll really be really easy. And that's where we pick up our next lesson. Our next lesson, we're going to start working on the actual create tournament form. We're going to lay out that actual form and start putting pieces in place where you want them. And we're really closing in on the end here. Because once we create the tournament, then we just display the tournament and we're done. So with that being said, that's it for this lesson. Stick around for the next lesson where we create our tournament form.